The conflict in Ukraine is continuing to claim lives and move the marker for a crisis with no solution in sight. I'm James Chau with Understanding on a rare in-person meeting between the leaders of China and Russia. I speak with Zhao Long, a senior fellow at the Shanghai Institute for International Studies. There's been some commentary overnight talking about Vladimir Putin and how he acknowledges that the Chinese leader has concerns about the war in Ukraine. That's taken a lot of people by surprise in the West. Should they be surprised? Why are they surprised that China is concerned about a war that it has nothing to do with?
It's quite understandable for China because of course, we have all round of strategic coordination between China and Russia, but it doesn't not mean that we do not have some differences on current situations, on the future of international system, and especially on Russian-Ukraine crisis. That's also the reason why President Putin mentioned that China has its own concern, and China has to formulate its policy and its strategy based on our own interests. So that's why I think also reflects the importance of the high-level dialogue on those issues to be more frequent, to be more practiced in the in-person, face-to-face mode rather than the virtual mode.
So now we know that China appears to have concerns about what's happening in Ukraine. How exactly is it going to act on those concerns if it hasn't already? We may not know. Backdoor diplomacy, quiet diplomacy. Do you think that China will rise to a more public position, for example, in moderating a solution so that people can live and survive this conflict?
The main goal for China is to de-escalate the situation and to find a way or to rebuild the platform of the negotiation, which been suspended for months. And also, I think China is more concerned about the spillover effect of this crisis. For example, the energy crisis, humanitarian crisis, food crisis, and etc. So China, of course, is willing to contribute its reasonable effort to be one of the important constructive actor in the peaceful negotiation. But meantime, I think China is considering this conflict or this step, this important step, should be made first of all by the Russia and the Ukraine itself, and also not to further providing heavy weapons, not to make such provocative accusations towards each other.
I want to finish with this, Zhao Long. This is a hugely significant meeting for a number of reasons. One being that it's the first time that President Xi Jinping has stepped outside of China since the early days of this pandemic. Secondly, what they're discussing here, obviously, is of global proportions and has global consequences. But ultimately, this is a meeting between two leaders of two countries. What do you see ahead for Moscow and Beijing? Are they going to move closer together? Is energy going to be the sole basis of that strategic partnership?
The outside world has some misperception, in my opinion, and misunderstanding about the so-called no limits of Sino-Russian cooperation, which does not mean that the cooperation in all fields is unlimited. No limits relationship has the bottom line. It should not harm the China or Russia's national interest or the overall interests of international community. I think it's quite easy to understand when the country handles its foreign relations. Its first consideration is its own interests, so which may lead to areas where bilateral relations need to be fine-tuned.
Zhao Long, it's a pleasure speaking with you today and beginning to take in these early hours after the meeting some of the implications and impacts ahead. Thank you very much.